This comes from Sam on Twitter. Said, really enjoyed the episode. Would love to hear you guys talk about a fix for Navy after moving on from Coach Niamontalolo. So, Sam, first of all, shout out to you for the suggestion. We loved it. We've got four teams that we're going to dive into today, and because you asked for Navy, the midshipmen are up first. Guys, the midshipmen went 4-8 in 2022. It's not that they weren't competitive in the majority of their games, but they just couldn't quite find the way to get the offense going when they absolutely needed to. I think it was a little bit of a surprise to all of us when Coach Niamontalolo was fired just because he had been there for so long. He and Navy football had really become synonymous with one another, especially after Paul Johnson left and the triple option stayed installed. Now Brian Newberry is the 40th head football coach for the Naval Academy. He's been promoted from the defensive coordinator role. And the defense at Navy has really never been the issue. In fact, they finished sixth in the country at defending the run last season. Where they were really vulnerable was the pass defense, and that offense, when they did get into shootouts, just simply couldn't keep up. So, my question to you guys, and I think really the place to center Navy's discussion around, we know they're never going to be able to recruit like a normal program will. None of the service academies can. But it all comes down to how you run your offense. We've seen it succeed at Air Force. We've seen it succeed a couple of times at Army. What are some easy fixes or changes that Navy can make to get back to consistently making a bowl game and even being ranked and competing for the American?
Well, when Navy was at its best, and when any service academy is at its best, they're committing to one identity, right?
Mhm.
And usually in the past, that's been a triple option, a veer, some variation of that. I'm really interested to see what happens with Navy in this new direction that they're going. Grant Chestnut is the guy that they've tabbed as the offensive coordinator. He's coming over from Kennesaw State. I'll be honest, guys, I don't know about y'all, I haven't watched a ton of Kennesaw State, so I'm not gonna have, like, an intense breakdown. Um, Off the top of my head, I don't think they're a triple option team,
I
though, and
don't
I
think
could
so
be
either.
wrong on that, so it's gonna be really interesting to see as that transition happens. We talked about this with Georgia Tech on the last episode. That is a tough transition. If you wanna get away from the triple option into a different offense, that's not an overnight switch because you have recruited for that offense. You've recruited specific players that fit that offense. So switching every possible thing you could from a triple option to a more modern offense is going to take time, and usually it's not successful in the first year. I'd say like 90% of the time it's not successful, and if it is, it's because you were able to bring in just some generational talent, which Navy is going to struggle to do in this modern era with as a service academy. So
Mhm.
yeah, the offense is going to be fascinating to me to watch how they build it, what scheme they decide to run. And as Garrett takes over, I'm going to start to try to find some stats on Kennesaw State here, real quick.
Well, and the thing that I was looking at with regards to Navy is it's just time for them to catch up with the modern era of football. They, pulling a couple stats from this last year, they averaged 85 yards passing. That was on about 42%. And unfortunately, that also came with about 4.5 completions per game. I averaged better passing numbers than that playing in seventh grade. And so I don't want to insult these guys, but is there not anyone at the Naval Academy that can throw a football? I mean, like, do we need to go the walk on route? The let's just host tryouts. Can anybody, hit something 20 yards away, 30 yards away? Like, I mean, what are we doing here? I understand that the triple option has kind of been the identity. That's where they wanted to go. That's great. That's fine. No issues necessarily with that as a system, but I do think it's time for this to kind of move along, and I think we need to find something a little bit more suited for the modern day game because there's no way when you're looking at the way the triple option runs, it's too easy to defend because you're not spreading the football out, you're not changing dynamicism, you're not you don't have to cover sideline to sideline as frequently in terms of running back and forth as linebackers. Yes, you do have to run after the guy who's got the ball, but you're all kind of running at the same pace, and so it's not as hard as, a swing out pass, a tunnel screen, or having to stretch the field vertically and think about covering the seams, think about, having to cover a nine route. And so for an opposing defensive coordinator, it's just a little too easy to defend in the modern day, especially with as much time as you get to watch film and watch tendencies and see, okay, well, if the quarterback acts like this, shifts this way, then we know that it's going to be a handoff, or we know that this is going to be a keep. There's just too much that you can do to defend that. So I think it's just time for them to catch up with the modern world and, play more of a modern style of football. Not to say they can't play hard nose or be a run first team, but let's spread it out a little bit. Let's get in a shotgun. Let's do some of that, and if that's not the direction they want to go, that's fine. But I think that's the way that you fix what's wrong with their program.
Well, I think the problem with that is just that requires a certain level of athlete to then compete, right? I mean, anyone can run
Yeah,
that
turn it over. Yeah,
a modern spread, but you've got to have guys that can create separation, can get yards after the catch. And historically, the service academies don't excel at that, right? So, and
sure.
that's not what they're looking for. They can't recruit those athletes because of the military service, and so that's obviously why the schematics end up being the way that they are. I did look up Kennesaw State film, and they do run the triple option. Now they pass it a lot more than
I was gonna
what
say,
you might
looking at
see.
stats, it does look like they passed just a little bit more than a typical triple option team, but they were first in their conference in rush attempts, first in their conference in yards per attempt, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So, it's going to be a very similar look, but it may be the twist that they need. Where, look, we saw Air Force throw the ball this year and do it
Hmm.
quite effectively, right? I mean, Hazik Daniels, I don't know. I checked on him last week. I don't believe he's landed anywhere out of the transfer portal, but he was electric at times and he would pull that ball and then throw it over the top. And I mean, it didn't take more than a tight end running a seam route, right? And he was gone to the residence. So, I do think getting a little bit more creative with the offense is certainly where you have to start. Plus, in the modern era of college football where defenses literally have to be able to defend at all three levels, and especially in the American where it's going a lot more pass heavy, I don't know that there is one thing that I would say, okay, this is the fix for your pass defense, but man, some of those shootouts against SMU. Let me pull up their schedule real fast. SMU, their shootout against who was I thinking? Well, they didn't respond, but they give up 37 to Memphis, a pass happy team under Seth Hennigan. That's where they got beat. Really, 7 or 8 of those 8 losses were just due to the fact that they couldn't defend the pass. So I think finding ways to, whether it's scheming, bringing blitzes, etc., so that you're not giving a quarterback all that time to throw downfield. I think that's where you got to start.
Well, but real question, what are they practicing against, right? If there's nobody on the roster that can, like you were saying, throw the ball, create separation, but you're going up against all these other teams that can, like, what are you going up against in practice? You're going to practice against a certain level, and that's going to influence how you end up playing the game, right? That's what they talk about with all these, when recruits go to schools, they'll talk about, I wanted to compete against the best in practice so I could, you know, go ahead and create a better situation for myself, get better so that the games feel easier than the practices do, so that I'm competing as the best, I'm refining my skills. What are they competing against in practice if they don't have the ability as an offense to throw a football? If you can't practice against a passing offense, then how are you going to play against a passing offense? You don't see it. You don't know what it looks like for receivers to run some of these complex route trees and do that. So if they're not going to try it as an offense, then I don't expect them to be able to defend it, because you're not going to wake up on a Saturday and
Mhm.
just know how to defend this because you saw that they did it on film. And so I guess if we try a cover three and we blitz a guy different, like, none of that's going to change what you've seen and what you've done in practice, right? And so I'm concerned, if you're not going to try to pass the football a little bit more, how do you expect to be better either on offense or on defense? It doesn't make sense to me that they wouldn't at least attempt to go about that. And I understand that they're not going to get the same level athlete as some of these bigger schools, but I mean, you can't tell me that there's not some guys who are fast in the Naval Academy that wouldn't mind playing some football. You can't tell me they can't get one guy who could be maybe not a burner, but just run, like a 4.5, 4.6, fast enough to kind of create some separation there and threaten deep. You can't tell me there's none of those guys that'll play at Navy. I just won't accept that as a truth. I understand that it's harder to get guys to show up there, but I'm not going to accept that there's nobody who can pass a football accurately or catch a football beyond 10, 20 yards downfield. They have to be out there, and they have to do a better job of finding that, I think, as a staff and being able to put that together.
They have the most unique recruiting challenges of anybody in Division One, and credit to them. I think a lot of teams in their similar situation have dropped down to the FCS level, and they refuse to do that. All three service academies want to stay at Division One FBS level, and I think that's amazing. And the triple option can win and can win big, as we've seen at Navy. They've won 11 games multiple times in the last decade. The problem is you have to be able to adjust, and the triple option, it works when the game goes with it. And so if the other team can't stop the run, you're going to win that game by 30 points. You just are, because they're not going to stop it. You're going to roll right down the field. You're going to take all the time. You're going to win by multiple scores. If the other team is good at stopping the run and they have a quick response offense and you just get off schedule, they can really torpedo your whole, chances of winning a game with one series, one sequence where they stop you, they score, they stop you one more time, they score. It's pretty much over if you get down by a couple points, because you just can't make that comeback quickly. So, yeah, I agree with you guys. They have to be able to find some way to make it a little bit more modern in the passing attack, some new concept. Maybe, this little tweak of the triple option from Kennesaw State is going to be able to do that, because they did throw for more yards. I think I looked up the stats. I think it was like 500 or 600 more yards than Navy did this year. So maybe a little bit more frequency in the passing game opens up that rushing game. And look, they're not playing against the 85 Bears in the American, right? They're not playing against, Tulane had a pretty decent defense this year. Cincinnati is out of the American now. They're in the Big 12, but they're kind of the standard for defense. And even they struggled to stop the run at times, because it's just a different type of athlete in the American. So you're able to win, but you have to be able to keep up in these games, and that's the big key to me.
Gracious,